You are listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. Sustainable World Radio brings you in-depth interviews, news, and commentary about positive solutions to environmental challenges. Solutions that adhere to the permaculture ethics of earth care, people care, fair share. Are you interested in learning more about permaculture projects around the globe? How to plant a food forest? Restorative design or ethnobotany? Then stay tuned for Sustainable World Radio. I'm your host and producer, Jill Cloutier. My guest today is Dr. Monica Galliano. Monica is the author of the new book, Thus Spoke the Plant, a research associate professor of evolutionary ecology at the Center of Evolutionary Biology at the University of Western Australia. Monica is also a research affiliate at the Sydney Environmental Institute at the University of Sydney. Monica pioneered the new research field of plant bioacoustics. Her work has also furthered the concept of cognition in plants. Welcome back to Sustainable World Radio, Monica.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Since we last spoke in our interview in 2015, you've written a book and completed and offered more research to the world that challenges the predominant contemporary view of plants as non-sentient objects. For listeners who may not be familiar with your prior research, I'm wondering if you could share just a bit, maybe some of the highlights of your groundbreaking research with us. Research that actually shows that plants have perception, memory, can learn, and have consciousness. And I wanted to also let listeners know if they want to dive more deeply into your prior research, I will include a link to our first interview in the show notes.
I guess last time we spoke, maybe the study which became famous because primarily of Michael Pollan's piece on the New Yorker was on the Mimosa pudica and the plant that could learn and a very basic level of learning and remember for a long time what I taught it to do. Well, since then, I moved on to another species of plants as my kind of model for the laboratory stuff. And I worked with peas, the simple, humble green garden pea. And with peas, I kind of looked at a new level of learning, which is known as associative learning, or for many probably will be also familiar the concept of the Pavlovian learning from the study of Pavlov with his dog. And now, in the case of the dog, the Pavlov noticed that he could get the dog to salivate by just ringing a bell after training. And when the dog realized that, the bell always anticipates my dinner, and so the bell alone became the trigger that would allow the dog to know what was coming next. And so I did a similar experiment by using plants. So in my case, the dinner for the plants was light, and the equivalent of the bell was a little fan. And, of course, the plants want light. And in the case of peas, we know that they, bend towards it. But I put a little fan always arriving before the light would arrive. And by using the fan alone, then the peas would know that, the light is coming next and it's coming from this direction. So they would bend towards the fan because the fan was a good predictor of light and they learned the association. And so that is pretty good because, it's compared to the mimosa, where mimosa basically needed to learn and answer a simple question is yes or no, while the peas needed to okay, if this is true, then I'll do that, which is a more complex level of, computation. And so it opens further the question of cognition, but it goes a little bit beyond as well, because we have always assumed that associative learning is definitely the realm of animals and definitely the realm of organisms with neural systems and brains, but plants of course don't have either. So and they're not the only one, but so it was an exciting finding, and of course I really like the pea in particular because again, many people will probably know that peas were the study subject for Mendel, who was the father really of genetics, and so genetics kind of look at the real tiny details of organisms, and in a way the organism disappears. So what genetics has managed to do, it has really disintegrated literally the organism by pulling it apart so that it could see the tiniest parts that make it, the genes. And so I think it's funny, and I find it kind of subversive that a pea would come in, the same pea, and it would actually do exactly the opposite by reconstituting the plant into the individual, the organism, and not really caring about what the details inside are, because the behavior is expressed by the whole, not by the details. Of course, many ask me the question, like, oh, so what is the mechanism? And often I said, I don't know, and I don't really care right now because I'm just so amazed that, this entire organism as a subject of his own life can make the choices that he needs to make. And so in that sense, he reconstitutes the plants to the subject rather than the objectification that genetics has achieved over the decades.
Yeah, it's almost like you're working in partnership with them.
Yeah, totally. I'm working for them, really, I should say. Yeah. I also did another experiment, which I think possibly people is familiar with, still with peas. But in this case, I looked at their behavior in terms of how they look for resources and specifically water, and how they can listen for where the water source is, and then move towards it by using the sound of or the vibration in the ground of water moving in the ground. And of course that is also cool because it could have like practical application, and he also explains some of our issues when we are competing for water with plants in terms of like our pipelines and our sewer systems underground that are always breaking in by the roots of plants. And this is a fact because cities and municipalities around the world spend like millions every year in cleaning the pipes, replacing broken pipes, in lots of chemicals that they have to use apparently to clear those pipes. And it's always about the plants and their roots breaking in. So, the idea that, they're just, they're listening to the sound of water, and of course they're going to find it. And even when they are really quite far away, and because sounds travel so well. So that I thought was really cool. And from an ecological perspective, I think it would be really useful for us to reconsider again, our role and our relationship, even in urban environments where we're sharing, nevertheless, our lives with them.
I know there's a few other experiments. People can go to your website to learn more about them and also listen to our previous interview.
Yeah.
In the book, I liked how you said, plants learn and remember, get over it. Let's move on to the next thing, right?
Exactly.
You talked a bit about this in what you were just saying, but I'm curious, why do you think it has taken us so long to even be open to the idea of plant sentience?
Well, there are two answers to this question. On one side, of course, is from the perspective of our modern techno-scientific view of the world, which is actually quite recent in terms of like in the history of humanity and in the history of this place. And from that perspective, it is the dominant view at the moment, plants have been totally objectified, but not just plants, everything is being objectified, everything is being colonized. So we have colonized and objectified animals too, as we see it from, the farming production and how we do that. But also humans. We have totally colonized our own species, and it's really bizarre because like this is self-colonization, self-objectification, and it reduces the human to nothing. It reduces the human to numbers or to the next employee or the next in queue. And it doesn't appreciate the human as the individual and how each one of us is a special being in the sense that we all are here to offer something special and different and unique, even if there's nothing special about us as a species. Like we are all special. So that is one perspective. And I guess because as a scientist I am embedded in that paradigm, I think it's very interesting actually that my research would be placed in that sense, in that context, because it's exactly the context that I think needs changing. But from another perspective, a totally different approach, and I know that there is plenty of people out there who are living in this second kind of world. Well, this is really an animist view of the world, a place where everything is alive, and therefore plants are never objects, and they've never been objects. And so from that perspective, then really, that get over it is not really addressed or directed to these people. It's addressed and directed to this paradigm that is insisting in creating objects out of everything, and so separating everything from everything, which is, it might be a fine way to live, but it's not very joyful or very colorful or very happy, and it's causing problems. So maybe it's not very useful either. So yeah, these are the two, I think, the two perspectives. And I guess over the years, I realized that I'm really good at walking into both. And so maybe my work is useful to bridge them.
Well, that brings us to your book, Thus Spoke the Plant. You not in the book, you not only share your scientific experiments in detail, explaining about how you did them and what results you had, but you also share your very personal experiences with plants. I'd love to start at the beginning, where in 2008 you said that you received an invitation from the Vegetal World. Can you tell us a bit about that invitation, and are you glad that you RSVP'd and said yes?
Well, 2008 was a really hard year for me because my work was still focused on marine ecology, which is what I was trained for and what I did much of my original initial work. I did my PhD on the Great Barrier Reef, and I loved it, and it was great. And but that year I had an experience which I did share in the introduction to the book with my fish, which changed everything. And so I won't give it away too much, but basically I had to change what I was doing, and it was not an option. I had to. And I don't know, maybe some people is much better and goes down into change more gracefully than I did. I didn't. I wasn't very graceful, so it just felt to me like everything was falling apart, and I was not in a very happy spot because I just didn't know what to do in my life. But there was no option. I had to change, and I guess that was the time when we just moved with my partner at the time. We just moved to Perth from across the country here in Australia, and we had a new home, and we started the garden. And so while I was in the midst of all this change and this disintegrating apart, the garden was growing, and the garden was present, and the plants started arriving, and we live. I don't know much about the other places in terms of soil, but I know very well here where I live now in Perth is sand, pure and simple. There is nothing else there. So you really need to work the soil. You need to bring soil. You need to create and build the soil. You can't just plant things and hope that they can do it in sand. And so in that sense, the garden demanded a lot of attention, demanded a lot of effort, a lot of learning, because we didn't know anything about this. And we started by planting things in sand, and then, oh, surprise, it didn't work. So there was a lot of engagement there, and trying to, learning about what works, what doesn't work, and why does it not work, and who is living there with you. And so I think that engagement kind of got me closer to the plants. And then one morning, I just, it was one morning in particular, I needed to go in the field, and it was quite early in the morning. And I literally, in the middle of suburbia, saw this snake crossing my gate at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, what is a snake doing there? And I don't know, something in that there was something about that moment, because I remember it very clearly. There's like something is about to change. Do you know those moments that if it was a movie, you're like, "Ooh, this is the turning point." Exactly. Of course, we never know when it's in life, so you have a feeling, but then you have no idea what's coming. And then from there, I think that's when the plants really came in, kind of with a vengeance, and they're like, "Okay, do you know your problem with your work? Well, you could work with us." And so I started, exploring and thinking, okay, working with plants, what does it mean? I don't know anything about plants. I'm not a botanist. I'm not a plant biologist. What do I do? And so I started reading, and then I started playing in the lab, and I guess this was already true in the case of my work with the fish. I'm the kind of scientist that is interested in the question more than the subject that I'm using for answering the question. So I looked at plants as if they were my animals, my fish, and I applied the same way of thinking that we would apply if that was an animal. And so that's where the work really started. And then, as you know, it took wild turns, and it became what it is.
When I was reading your book, I kept thinking about how you're merging the two worlds here of science and then also the direct experience of connecting with plants and then also learning directly from plants.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if it's a little scary to be merging these two worlds and in your book, especially, and then putting out this information to the world.
Yeah, it was. I In 2015, at the end of 2015, I actually finished the fellowship that I had, and I was left unemployed, and I was left unemployed for until now, actually. So for the last 3 years, and when I finished my job, I tried to apply for various positions, and I wouldn't even get shortlisted, even if the job was much lower ranking that I could apply for. And I realized very quickly that basically they just when they received my application, they just didn't know where to put me, because I was already in between worlds, and they didn't know, well, what is this science anyway? What is it? Is it a plant? Is it an animal? Who is she? And so it was very confusing, I think, for the other side. I had to choose because of course I just looked so weird as a scientist. Is I didn't fit in any particular box, and science likes their boxes, and so I guess it became very clear. It's like, no, you're not going to get a job so easily. And then the plants were very much like, well, you already have a job. And I was like, what do you mean? I already done everything you asked me to do. I did all the science that you wanted me to do. And this is what you do to me? The poor me self. Like, and they were like, okay, just chill out and they will tell you. And you got the book to write. And like, what book? Now I've got a book to write. And it's like, yeah. Do you remember? And I did remember, because in 2012, as I did say also in the book, I did go and do a vision quest up in California, Northern California, and the plants there did tell me that I needed to tell their stories. But at the time, of course, I thought, oh, they want me to tell the stories through the science. And that's cool, because that's exactly what I want to do. So, yeah, the two agendas are in perfect harmony. And so I went off and did my science and had a great time and all good. The problem was that I didn't realize that when they said you need to tell us stories, they meant the entire story, including, the behind the scene, including, this vision quest, for example, another crazy story that you already know from the book. And so I was like, no, there is no way. I cannot tell these stories, like this. If they can't employ me now, this is really going to put the nail on the coffin. It's like, seriously, no, you can't ask me to do this. And it's like, you have to. And I'm like, why? And it's like, you have to. This is what it's needed, the entire story, not just half. Otherwise, the half is not going to be powerful enough, because it's still speaking to a particular paradigm. And what, from the history of science, we know that my science, even if it's a little bit, for some people, it's still perceived as a bit controversial or whatever, it will become just normal stuff soon, because that's how science operates. But I think that the plants don't want it to stay normal in that way. They wanted, it's a subversive attempt, they wanted to really change something in the mind. And so I was like, okay, you want me to write this book? Let's write this book. And so that's how really the book came about. And then once I started writing, it was an amazing experience, and I really enjoyed it.
So, Monica, you say that your new book is what you call a human plant collaboration, and you term it plant writing. And then you also say that much or some of your research and experiments were guided by the plants themselves. And that in fact, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, the Ayahuma or cannonball tree
Yep,
dictated your pea experiment to you and even suggested that you use peas and not sunflowers.
that's correct.
Can you share with our listeners a bit about how you have connected so well with plants? I know that you went on a lot of travels, you were at home and traveling, and while doing so, you actually would do something called I think it's dietas.
Yep.
So you would experience a dietas with certain plants. And I'm just curious if you can tell us a bit about how you have connected so well with the plant world that they are actually communicating with you directly and also guiding your writing, your life, and your work.
Yeah, well, I don't really know how they do it. I know that they do it for sure. And I just got better and better at listening, I think. And that is definitely a key word for me. And it's still, even now, I'm very aware of the fact that I can't just engage with anything or choose to do whatever. There are some things that are appropriate and they support the whole, and others they don't. And so that's how my collaboration with them also developed, and it's now in full fledged, I guess. So whenever I'm kind of told this is what it's needed now, I trust it 100%, and I follow it 100%. Because just like my peas and my mimosa, I learn very well, and I learn from experience that when this call comes, it's a very honest and very caring call, and there is always a much bigger picture behind it. I can't see, but it's there. And I can't see in the sense of like my human form can't see and can't really appreciate and grasp, because I'm the product myself of my society, my conditioning. So I'm not allowed, in a way, I'm not allowing myself to really see clearly everything. But that doesn't mean that others can't see. So if those others are happy and supporting, for me to add those parts of the information that I don't have, then why not? And as I said, through experience, I learned that they are very accurate and they will never mislead or lie. Because they also know that I'm very honest and I will follow their instructions. So there is a trusting relationship, I guess. And it's not just with plants. I mean, plants are the main driver for me, but really, they're just a representative of the earth itself and all the animals and everything that it's here. So, so yeah, I listen deeply, and I follow the path, the trail that is shown in front of me. And even as I say this now, I realize that I've always done this, even when I was younger. I left Italy to go and study in the UK, and I've always seen myself doing that even before I actually did that. I describe myself like I see steps in front of me, and I just had to put my feet onto those steps, and I'll be fine. And so I'm not saying that everything is preordained and you don't really have any choices. As the plants keep reminding me every time, is that you have always got a choice of engaging or not, putting the step there or not. It's up to you. But if you do, sometimes real incredible magic happens, and then you trust more. And so that, I guess, the entire relationship with the plants kind of emerge out of trust, deep trust. And so even when when I'm told, oh, we got to go back to Peru, and I'm like, no, 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 I don't want to go back to Peru. Yes, we do, we have work to do there. And I'm like, oh no. And so then I find myself in the middle of nowhere, doing this process like a dieta, which really is a process of isolation and from everything and everyone, so that you can really go inside rather than be so distracted from the outside. And then in that space, as anybody that has done meditation would also know, there is a lot of silence. And when there is a lot of silence, you can hear much quicker and much sharper and much clearer. And so that's when the plants are really able to speak very clearly, and they can be heard very clearly. And so the dieta is a special process that is done in some tradition in the Amazon. And and I resonate with it very well because, again, it's a matter of trust. I know that through this process, the plants will arrive. So, yeah.
Yes, I've had some unexplainable experiences with plants in my gardens throughout my life at different times when I'd just be sitting with a plant. And so when I was reading your experiences with the plants that you've connected with, it just made me think that it's time for animists to come out of the closet. The earth needs us. The animals and plants and earth need us. So animists, come on out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's time.
It's time. Some of the experiences that you had with some of the plants, listeners may be familiar with some of the plants that you engaged with, and others maybe not so much. But I wrote down a few that were interesting to me. And I don't know if it was your first experience, but was it Sakoba?
Yeah.
And then another one was Osha root. And then I also love the oak tree that told you that you were here to tell our stories. Your work will reveal plant people to the human world. There's also Piñam Blanco, Jatropha, who introduced you to another plant, I believe, Ayahuma, who actually ended up helping you with an experiment. I think cacao, you said, helped teach you about time. And then there was also tobacco that was really interesting to me, your experience with tobacco. So I'm just curious for listeners to get an idea of what this dietas or what some of your plant experiences were like, if you'd be willing to share one of these experiences with us.
Well, they're all different, obviously. And I guess the tobacco was probably the most amazing for me. And I have done more work with other plants since, I had to interrupt the book writing a few times because the plants are, oh, we need to do this now. And one of these examples was the tobacco, actually, because, I was in the middle of writing, I think, the second chapter. And then it was like, we have to go. And I'm like, where? And then next thing I know is like a friend of mine from about 5 hours drive from where I live, and she lives in the middle of the forest. She sent me an email or a text on the phone saying, well, I'm going to go mind my place. And I was like, sure, I can mind your place. So off I went, and I realized what the tobacco was saying is like, we need to go. And it's like, yeah, we need to go. So I packed up my things and I went down to her place. And so I was there in this beautiful, perfect spot, far away from everyone and everything, just in the forest with the plant, the tobacco plant. And I remember the first time I did my very first dieta in Peru. The Shipibo man that I was working with, the curandero, said to me when we were just chatting about his own story and how, he trained as a curandero since he was a kid, really, and which is quite common. And And then he said to me, I did a lot of dietas with my grandpa and then with different other curanderos around. And then there is a time, he said, when the plants will call you by name, and they will tell you it's time to do it, and you'll have to go and you'll have to do it yourself. And so no more intermediary, but it will be just you and the plant. And I realized that when the tobacco called, that's what it was. And of course, of all plants, I mean, tobacco is such a big, big plant. Not in terms of dimensions, of course. The physical dimension is quite unremarkable, really. But as a spirit, it's amazing. And so I went down, and for the next few weeks, I worked with this plant, and I did my own dieta alone with the tobacco and my dog, which is my little assistant, and. And yeah, it was incredible because by the time I finished the dieta, which was quite intense and quite rich at the same time, yeah, I remember coming back, and it was so clear. It's like, this is your last chapter. You gotta write it down now. And I'm like, what? This is the last chapter of the book? And it's like, yeah, this is it. So that last chapter, the coda, was actually written almost at the beginning, and it's probably, out of the entire book, is probably the most mystical, or the most ungrounded, perhaps is the right word, because it was coming straight out of the dieta, and it was coming straight out of, if I could say, the tobacco's mouth, and so there is very, very little filtering of not filtering, but like I didn't put much of the context, really, because there was no context. It was just like, this is it, this is what arrived. And but for me, what it was sharing was just, it changed me and touched me so deeply that I really felt the reason why we are in the situation that we are in as humanity and as a planet, and also the human condition in general, of like, the little games that we play with ourselves, and how we can't see because we are staring at these you know smoky mirrors, and we are making all our choices and decisions based on these distortions. And of course, I mean, when you make decision based on distortion, your decision are going to be distorted. It's inevitable. So it was just an amazing experience, and yeah, I deepened, I guess, into the trust as well, because yeah, I had to just pack my car, go to stay, at a friend's place, without really knowing what I was doing, really, and but totally, following the guidance and just following what is, what is being said, and the tobacco in itself is, as we know very well, it's a plant that it kills every year many, many people. The tobacco can be a very serious killer, and so then trusting that it won't hurt me, and trusting that he's going to share what he needs to share, and I need to hear this, whatever it is that he's got to share. Yeah, I think about it. I always think about these things afterwards. First, I do, and then it's like, oh my God, why did I do that? And like, I could have died. And it's like, yeah, but you didn't, did you? So it's okay. So yeah, it was an amazing experience, but I think that it's a good example of how this kind of process worked for me. And I'm sure that I know that there is many people out there who has very similar experiences, or very different, but they lead to the same place and the same kind of relating. And that's why it seems really timely that we become a little bit more honest about who we are, in terms of like very empathic beings that can communicate with the rest of the world, and we do it all the time anyway, whether we say that we do it or not. And because I think these return to ourselves will actually return us here, and we will be able to really see what we're doing, because at the moment I don't think we are really seeing what we're doing. Otherwise we would stop immediately. And so the distraction that we are seeing is just yeah, it's just the result of distorted perceptions. And of course, from a more basic level of, oh, it's greed and all of that. Yeah, but what is greed? Why are you greedy? What does it mean? And so, yeah, I think the plants have a lot to say about who we are. And the experiments that I do in the lab as the scientist, really, I think that ultimately, I mean, they're cool on their own right, but ultimately, I'm really excited about what I find when I engage, because they're speaking of us. They're speaking of the human. They're speaking of our preconceived ideas, biased conditioning, what we don't see because of those. And so they're an opening to like, well, you're not seeing clearly, so obviously. So why don't you remove those glasses and see what's behind, behind them for real? And so that for me is exciting.
So exciting. And when we come from a place of separation, when our original standing point is incorrect, we feel separate from everything. I can see how that fuels the environmental destruction that we're witnessing and the disconnection between ourselves.
Yeah.
So, Monica, in the book, you say that we can learn directly from plants and that there is a huge archive of knowledge that we can actually connect with plants and learn from them. So, I'm just curious. I think a lot of listeners who are tuning in right now are wondering how they can tap into that knowledge and connect more with the plants in their lives. And I'm also curious if you believe that psychedelic drugs are necessary to have this experience with plants.
Okay, so this is a very important question because one, I think it's very simple to tap in to the plant or allow them to speak, and it's just a matter of spending time with. And we know that to be the case. And the best example that I can think of, because I've been thinking about this, is like, how do you, if someone else wants to do this, how do they do it? And it's like, I don't even know how I do it. So it's a bit difficult. And I'm not really a teacher in that sense. It's like, I don't have a method. But what I can say is like, the closest example to me of how it feels to me when I have this conversation and this relationship with plants is the same that I would have with my dog. So when you start your relationship with a pet, with a dog, at the beginning you don't know each other very well, so you get the time you need to spend time together to get to know the little things that each one of you does, and then it becomes like the what we call second nature. It's like, oh yeah, my dog or my cat always does that after this, or he likes that, he doesn't like this, and I do this with my dog, and I know that many people with pets would do the same. It's like it almost feels like you're talking to them, and they're talking back at you with no words. So it's kind of like the best word, although I don't know if it's the right word, is a kind of telepathic communication, right? It's like you already know where your dog is happy. You can tell from his body and just the little noises, or just the look, just as you would with a lover, with a friend, another human, another person. And so the dog becomes a person. And I think when the plants become a person, then you are relating person to person. And each one of us, I think, like in any relationship, I can't tell you how to relate to my dog, because your relationship with my dog will be yours. And it is to be special, and it is to be just yours, because it's not mine. My relationship with my dog would be my unique relationship with him, and that's why it's beautiful. It's like we got these amazing, unique moments of connection everywhere with everyone, and so I think the plants are no different. And the only reason why we might think that they're different is because we're still, despite all, and I caught myself so many times already, despite everything, despite the openness, or yeah, no, I believe the plants have, something alive in them. We are part of our society, a society that has objectified them, and so not just talking, but really feeling the personhood of these others. It has to go through this filter that says no, they're not persons, they're objects. And even if you're aware of it, and first step of course is to be aware that there is a filter there, then you need to scrub that filter out, and it takes time, like with all relationships. So I mean, even with human relationship, we always engage in relationship and we see in the other what we want to see, and then they turn out not to be what we wanted them to be, and it's like, oh dear. So then the relationship falls apart, or there is a deepening. So this is exactly the same. Get your glasses off, see what's really there, and engage with what is really present with you there. And because there's a thing, you will see yourself and you will see the other, and you will see much clearly what's happening around you as well. And I think this is not a special gift of some. I don't feel like I have a special gift. That's like rubbish. This is a birthright. This is us. This is part of who we are. And we just have to return to acknowledge that and really live like full humans. We've been objectified. As I said at the beginning, we've been colonizing ourselves with certain ideas that do not serve us. And in that process, we have shrunk and diminished the amazingness that we are. So, yeah, I don't have a secret teaching or any of those, mystical things to give away.
I think that's great because you're not saying for $5,000, I will show you how.
No, it's like just get into your garden and you'll
Mhm.
see. Or go for a walk in the forest. Just stop talking and just listen. And
Mhm.
yeah, and I think that will, you know, I don't know how many people goes when they especially when you're feeling a little bit down or not feeling too good. People tend to go, oh, I'm just gonna go for a walk, and you don't go for a walk in concrete. You want to go for a walk at the beach, or you want to go for a walk in the forest or in a park, something that is alive, because we know that that is who we also are, and so we are trying to find ourselves out there again. And so we already know how to do this. It's our nature. There's nothing difficult about it. There is nothing special. And that's why, in a way, this book and it feels like, oh, what is this esoteric jumble, whatever. It's like, that's okay. You can feel whatever you like. But it's an invitation. Before you judge, I invite you to walk your own steps and in your own shoes, but for real, and see what's there for you.
It's wonderful. And I think when I sit and meditate with the plants or just sit in the garden, for me, the hardest part was always the time. I always had a part of my brain that was like, okay, get up now, go in, go in. You've been out here long enough. What are you doing? And I feel like the longer I would be there and the longer I would sit and disregard that part of my mind, that's when the communion and connection the magic could happen. So I think that's part of it. Just we're also fast paced and distracted by devices that it's hard. You really have to sink almost into a different time zone, the plant zone.
Yes, which actually, again, it's our real time.
And yeah, time is one thing I wanted to talk to you about, but really, really quickly, I'm just curious. It doesn't sound like you think that psychedelics are necessary for plant connection.
Oh, yeah, of course. No, that was, sorry, I forgot that there was the other part of the question, which is a really important part. Okay, so for me, the real deal with the psychedelics is, first of all, every single plant that you ingest is psychedelic of some form, because it's actually literally changing your chemistry, because that's what food
Mhm.
does. Uh, so every time you ingest is food, and that's its purpose, is to recreate and rebuild your physical body. So if that's not a trip, I don't know what it is. Then there are plenty of food that we eat. Like just think about, things that you do in the morning, like from your banana, which makes you really happy, to maybe you have a piece of chocolate, which also makes you really happy because of the neurotransmitters and chemistry that these foods have, that will actually literally alter the state of your brain so that you feel happy. And then you have a coffee and suddenly your heartbeat goes up and you're feeling very dynamic and fast, and your mind again changes. Your entire awareness is much sharper and focused and fast. So what is the difference? It's like all of the foods that we use, all of the plants that are around us have some form of altering effects on us. And so psychedelics is kind of like a subset of those. And the fact that some of them are criminalized is I find it quite ridiculous, actually. But I'm talking about psychedelic plants, not in terms of the chemistry and the chemicals, because personally, I don't really connect with the actual, man-made thing. So for me, I can't speak about those. And for me, there are kind of different conversation because I'm talking about the plants as the plants. But yeah, when we talk about the psychedelic plants and do I need them, it's like well, if you like bananas, eat bananas. If you, if you like cacao, eat cacao. And depending on how you eat and how you engage with it, cacao is a good example. It's a beautiful it's a beautiful psychedelic medicine as well as just a really yummy food. And where is the boundary? What is the difference? None. Tobacco, as we said, is a master plant, and it's definitely like highly psychedelic if used in a particular way, but it's actually deadly if you misuse. And so with everything, you can eat too much of a thing and they will it will give you a stomach ache or it will make you vomit. And you can, you need to know how to engage appropriately. And the only way to know that is to really understand why you are engaging in the first place, who you're engaging with. And then you would never really abuse because that doesn't make any sense. Because abusive relationships, as we know, are not very nice and they don't end up very well. So yeah, I think that the psychedelic story, which I'm really happy to see, especially in the context of the new book from Michael Pollan, is experiencing this renewal, revival, whatever we want to call it. It's great, but it's just one other way of experiencing these plants. But it's got nothing to do with our innate ability to connect or not. It's not that if you don't take the psychedelics you will never experience these. It's like, no, actually I had some really powerful experiences with my plants in the garden, just as you did in your garden, just sitting there. And it was like, oh, okay, this is what's happening, all right. And I have been taken recently. I had made decision and been taken to places like overseas, following exactly what was shared and what I saw in my garden. And I didn't ingest anything. I was just breathing in, which is a kind of a form of ingesting anyway. But yeah, so of course I'm kind of pro psychedelics in the sense that I know how beneficial they can be and how quickly you can get to certain places, but they are absolutely by no means necessary or the only way. So whatever works for each one of us, and whatever works in the terms of the relationship that it's honoring and caring, then it doesn't really matter. All things are psychedelics, including your own brain on its own, because it's creating right now this beautiful fantasy, and you're having a nice trip. So enjoy.
And I know we're getting close to the end of our interview today, but I wanted to touch on one of the larger concepts that you wrote about in your book, and that's space and time versus multidimensionality. And in the book, you say that real time is in here, and in here in quotes, and that real time is not out there in quotes, and that cacao taught you about time. You also write that reclaiming time is the most revolutionary act of empowerment that could save us and the planet. What do you mean by this?
Well, it connects with your experience in your own garden. It's like we are, again, as part of the social system that we have created and we are subscribing to, we are dictating our rhythms according to times that are not real. We made them up, and this is not me saying it. It's like there is actually a date where time starts, the time that we use, and it was primarily done so that we could perform better under the industrial system. And so it's a totally practical and totally pragmatic reason. It's like, oh, we just wanted workers to come in at a certain time and, automate and organize things better. So I guess the principle might work well. And the idea was, as many ideas often start like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, thanks to that kind of organization of our space and time, now we can fly in planes. Otherwise, can you imagine how difficult it would be to fly in planes? It's like, so what time are you arriving? I don't know. It will be any time, when it gets there, which anyway is the case. But so, there is a role for that kind of time. But then, like with many other things that we have done, it seems that that kind of became kind of dictatorial. And it's like, you have to be at this time in this place, and you have to be, and if you don't waste time, don't do this, don't do that, because this time and that time, and it just becomes this boxing in of people. And so now most people, I think, living in cities spend a lot of their time commuting, so that they can be in time for work and then be at work for that amount of time. And there is actually makes not much sense, in the sense that they return home, and most of the time they're totally exhausted, and they're not actually leaving any of the time left to them to live properly, to do what they really want to do, to love the people around them. So we are robbing ourselves by subscribing to a particular view of what time is and how we use our time. So the irony, of course, is that there is no time. Time is an invention, is a construction. And so to even think that we are wasting our lifetime by following a time that doesn't exist seems like, oh my God, what are we doing? And it's such a relative concept and a relative idea that doesn't really make much sense. And I learned about this when in these last 3 years, because I was unemployed, and it really gave me all of the time in the world to do like, okay, so what are you going to do with your time? And I had plenty of space to be able to just really sit there and do absolutely nothing.
That sounds great.
I know. And the amazing thing is that, at the beginning, of course, I felt very guilty and very like, you're not using your time properly, blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, no, actually, this is the appropriate use of time, to know that you can stop and just smell the roses. And it's okay. While you have been trained to think that that's not okay, and you have to do something all the time. And what is it that you're really doing anyway? And so I think time is an important concept, because it really is not so much that you can't function or you shouldn't function with the time of things. I mean, we organized the time so that we could have an interview. And the reason for this interview to actually happen is because, yeah, we both agreed and respected the time that we decided on. So time has got a role, but I think that we need to divest a lot of the things that we put into time, and really start investing our real time, the one inside, to sit in the garden, to go for a walk, to spend time with your people, to work less, because we are working like maniacs. But what are we working for? Where are we going? What are we really doing? We keep working for nothing, so that we can have more things and more time. Maybe no, we'll never have more time. And so I think contemplating time and how time is used, it's to me at least, it was such a revelatory experience, because when I work, I put myself 100% there, and time disappears because I'm there and I'm just doing what I need to do, and I don't care if it's really like midnight or whatever, because that's what I'm doing and I'm enjoying it. And at the same time, though, there are times when I'm not working and I am just sitting at the beach watching out, the water. And I'll stay there and I'll do that because I'm there, present there, until I'm done. And so that is the difference to me. That is the difference of time in here. that is just dictating exactly what it is that you need to do, and you need to be present to be able to know that. And the time out there which tells you what to do, and it tells you not to be present, because if you were present to it, you would never do it. So so yeah, time, I'm sure that I made it very confusing, but but I know that I need to work on this concept for myself to make sure that that I live life properly.
In the book, you also write about how the plants gave you advice about how to release the unresolvable loop of our need to feel safe and our need to control the world. Do you feel like talking about that?
No, it's good, because that is a fundamental one, I think. The idea, well, fundamentally, we are feeling always unsafe in the world, right? Especially, I speak of our, our time now as I said, as a techno-scientific world, where we feel unsafe, and because of that, we feel that we need to control things, and we use technology in particular, and a particular mindset to control things. Now, the loop is that, of course, if you need to control something, it's because you are intrinsically unsafe. And if you're unsafe, you need to control something so that you might feel safe. But to feel safe, it's a contradiction, because if you are controlling, unsafety must be there. And if you are unsafe, you feel you must control. So the two are part of the same coin. They're one thing, they come together. And so the only way to get out of there is that you drop one of them. And of course, dropping the feeling of unsafety is really hard, because if you're feeling unsafe, you're feeling unsafe. But control, that's the one that you can drop. And control is a lack of trust. Control is you feeling that uh, you need to do something so that you can feel safe. But what if you can feel safe by not controlling, by doing something else? And so that's where trust really comes in. And again, I don't have a particular, recipe to get there, but I know that engaging with the plants and following, for me, engaging with the plants and following the trail of what they showed me, and what they, our collaboration became, was a very good example for myself on how to feel safe without controlling, which is the only way. You will never be safe unless you let go of the control. And if you imagine, just to give another example, if you imagine our society, which is all going into this like surveillance mode, it's like, because, and the claim is exactly, oh, we'll surveil and we'll control everything so that you will be safe. But that is intrinsically impossible. Safety does not come with control. Safety comes with trust. We know this in relationship, and we also know in this, that in relationship, where one of the people involved in the relationship, no matter what form or whatever, it's a controlling character, the relationship is not balanced, and inevitably the other side needs to feel unsafe.
Kind of like the weeds in your yard when you spray Roundup.
Exactly, exactly. And what do the weeds do? They come back. They come back with a vengeance, and you feel like you need to put more. And exactly, it's a very important knot to undo, because again, that's the relationship, I guess, is a micro version of it. On the macro version of the story, oh, we are building and creating things on the land, so that we can feel safe in our little boxes. They are houses, yeah. And of course, everyone loves houses, and they have to be solid, and they have to be in a particular way to feel safe in them, right? But then, there is always the next thing that you're supposed to do to your house so that it's safer. And it's like, well, you're never going to be safe, because there's always going to be the next thing that you need to do to feel safe. And so stop controlling your life. Allow life to just, you know, be you, flow through you. You are life. So there is nothing to control. And when I find myself unemployed, And of course, that need of controlling was totally being ripped apart. It was like, no, you don't have any control on this. Hello. And it's like, it's very unsettling. It's very disturbing. It's very uncomfortable. And yet, did I die? Was I not supported? The amazingness actually was that I was shown how much support there was around me, how many people, held me gently so that I could do what I needed to do. And even now I still don't understand how I could have possibly done it, without all of that support. And where did that come from? Because I didn't notice, because I was so busy in my time keeping and my control keeping that I didn't see. So yeah, to and we see this element arises in time of crisis, and we see this very much, when people pulls together after a big disaster, in natural disaster kind of thing, when people suddenly is like, they tighten and they become one. Because I think that it's intrinsic in us to actually just be lived through, instead of trying to decide and control things, because our vision is so small. How can you control things that you don't know? So, but yeah, that one is an important point, and also, which I think is probably the case of other parts in the book as well. There's some things that, I felt I needed to put in there, even if I couldn't understand them completely. Because I'm not, as I said before, I'm not here to teach anyone or to be anything like, it's not a guidance. It's more like, here is what I've learned. And there are things that I was told and given that I actually still don't understand myself. But I also learned through that process that some of the things that I was given years ago then suddenly made sense many years later. And so I put those things there, even if they're not clear, even if I don't understand them myself, or maybe the reader won't understand, that's okay. Just let them, are you okay? We're leaving them there, letting them be, and allow them to become meaningful if they ever will, when they're ready and when you're ready to engage. So yeah, it's an open invitation to myself first of all, but then to anyone that is interested.
Well, Monica, I accept it. I love the book. I think it's really intriguing and great. I have a couple more questions. We're at a dark time in human history right now with climate change facing us on a global scale. And I'm just curious, how valuable do you think it is right now for us to start communicating with and or viewing plants and other species on the planet in different ways than we have been?
Well, it is the way out to me. It is the only way out, in the sense that the rest will just follow automatically. But unless we are actually able to, take those glasses off, or at least recognize that we're wearing glasses, and then engaging with the world in a more meaningful way, in a more personal way, person to person, basically. I think that is the key, because we already have. I just met so many amazing, amazing people with so many great ideas. We are amazing, imaginative beings. We don't lack imaginations and ideas. Look what we have created, in just a decade, even, or even in just the last year. We keep creating things, and we are so amazing in imagining things and making them, arrive in this world. So I don't believe for a minute that we can't solve this problem because we don't have the right technology, or we can't do it because we don't know what we want to do. And even the political will of doing what is needed, I don't think that is also the main problem. It's like, the political will come because it will be just the thing to do. But to be able to have people to know, oh, this is just the thing to do, like there is no question, of course this is what we do, is to realize that you need to have the right relationship in place. I mean, the people that we have in power at the moment in the US, but also everywhere in the world, they're people that actually I feel very much I feel lots of compassion for, because I realize that these are kids who haven't actually developed as proper human, fully fledged human beings, and they are put in position of power which are supposed to, make decisions that are too big for them. They are not qualified for the job. And so what we need is mature, emotionally mature human beings who are actually able to guide how relating is done. And we live in this relational world. So how else can we do it? There is no other way out.
Yes, yes, I agree. And I think too, when we extend our concept of family to the larger world, I can say for myself, I don't feel so much anxiety and I don't feel so alone.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing, when you realize that we're in this, all of us together, no matter what kind of jumper you wear. I know you in the US, you have like people wearing blues or whatever. It's like, what? Are we like little soccer teams now? It's like, what is this? And we're all humans and we are all people, like all of the people, not just human people, but other animal people, other plants people, bacteria people, all of the people.
The slime molds.
Exactly, all of us. So we need to recognize that, and we are not. And the moment we attack those that we perceive as our problem, well, we're failing, because they are not our problem. Our problem is the glasses that we are wearing.
After reading your book and learning about your research, and you've really gone out on a limb now by writing about your plant experiences, I'm just wondering where you find your courage to put yourself out in the world.
Who? I don't think it's courage, it's trust. So then I am not doing this for myself, but I am doing this because I am the right vehicle for this to happen. And that's all. So it's not about me. So I don't have to be courageous. I just have to do it. And literally, I am just the hands, the extension, and the hands that can, type on a computer and be inside a room and do the experiments. But it's not about me at all. So the same with this book is like I do know that for some people, especially in the academia environment, this book will be like outrageous, and that's okay. It's like the book needed to be written, so I did. The book will do whatever it needs to do, and it's none of my business.
Mhm.
And of course, I hope the book goes well and it reaches a lot of people. But that's just a wish. It's not like if it doesn't, it doesn't. It's like it will do what it needs to do, and it's got nothing to do with me. My job is only to hold it and bring it to places when I'm called to do that. And that's all. So no courage here, just trust.
Your boss was the oak tree.
Yeah.
And so, Monica, is there anything else you'd want to share with listeners today?
Maybe the last thing is I'm literally, when I, halfway through the book writing, the plant said to me, don't worry, when you start again, and when you go back to work again, you'll be very busy. So take this time to really rest and take this time to really enjoy not doing. And so the moment I put the last full stop on the book, a colleague of mine sent me an email inviting me to apply for this grant, which we did apply for, and I did get. And so just as the plant spoke, I am about to move, literally, I'm about to move to Sydney and start a new lab. It's going to be called BI, which is a kind of jokey take on the AI, artificial intelligence, but this one is going to be on biological intelligence. And the idea of the lab is to, of course, still work with plants, which are going to be my model anyway, but also extend the questions of cognition, choice, decision making, and all of these themes to other systems which are also like plants, no neurons, and they have no brains. So with this colleague in Sydney, we will work on the slime molds and many other little critters that I'm gonna be exploring with. Also, of course, the biological intelligence refers not only to the scientific aspect of what is intelligent in the biological world, but also what does it mean for a system to be biologically intelligent. And so it will. It's an invitation to anthropologists, social scientists of various kinds, medical researchers, historians, artists, people from the literature, the philosophers, of course, to come and join in. And so all perspectives are welcome. And the idea is, the biological intelligence lab is about bringing all of these perspectives into one place, and see how from all of these inputs we can come through a good approach and good suggestions, I guess, to move towards planetary health. And that's really the main goal of the entire work. So because I guess it's like, we are going to make this, right? We are going to make the right choices and change the things around. And then there will be a lot of restoration to do, and a lot of returning and bringing the entire place, people of all kinds, and the planet itself to a new state of health. So planetary health is the main goal, and I'm very looking forward to it.
It sounds wonderful, and it sounds like a perfect match for where you are right now.
Yeah.
And I really thank you for sharing your experiments and your direct plant experiences with us today on the podcast and in your book and out in the world. And I can't wait to interview you in a year or two to find out what new things you are discovering in the world of plants and possibly slime molds and other creatures.
Great. I have already a few ideas. I can't wait now. I'll be starting very soon, as soon as I set up the lab. So yeah, it's cool.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Jill. Like, it was nice to connect with you again.
You've been listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. You can find us online at sustainableworldradio.com and also on iTunes. For more information about permaculture and ecology, visit the Sustainable World Media YouTube channel, where you'll find videos about permaculture, aquaponics, organic gardening, rainwater harvesting, and much, much more. Sustainable World Radio is a listener-supported program. If you like what we do, please consider making a donation to the show. I'm your host and producer, Jill Cloutier, and thank you so much for listening.